Order, and we will start with our chaplain prayer, and Gary Jenkins is going to lead us in prayer.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Giving honor to God and to our Honorable Mayor Brenda Gunter, to the members of the City Council and all of the officers and those gathered here today. Thank you for allowing us to be here. Will you pray with me? Precious Father in heaven, in the name of Jesus, we bow before you to say thank you for another day that you have made. We thank you for your grace and your mercy, and we ask you to turn the heat up on this cold day today. And we ask you to just bless the City Council and the agenda that we have today, that everything will be done in a way that will glorify you and will be a blessing to the city. We thank you for just this opportunity to stand here and to pray with our leaders. And we ask you in Jesus' name to continue to bless them and bless our city. In Jesus' name, amen.
Today, our pledges. Our fourth grader was not able to make it due to our late start, so I've asked Gary and his wife to lead us in our pledges today, so go for it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas,
One state, under God,
one and indivisible.
Today, we have one proclamation. So, is anyone here to receive this proclamation this morning? Yes. I'm assuming it's Proclamation November 2019 as National Home Care and Hospice Month. Come on up here. Everyone just come on around here. In-home care allows patients to recuperate or to age in place, provides high-quality and compassionate health care services, and is a preferred method of health care delivery among disabled, elderly, and chronically ill individuals who are eager to live independently in their own homes as long as possible. Home care and hospice services allow families to stay together, providing for greater health, dignity, and comfort to individuals with acute and chronic illnesses, and provide care to millions of Americans each year. Home care nurses, therapists, and aides work tirelessly to provide professional health and palliative care and support Americans in need of quality health services. These dedicated home care professionals and volunteers form a support network that plays a vital role in health care delivery for our nation's disabled, infirm, and aging population. Across the United States, thousands of home care agencies are observing the month of November as National Home Care and Hospice Month in an effort to create public awareness and increase public education regarding these health care services. Therefore, I, Brenda Gunter, Mayor of the City of San Angelo, Texas, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim November 2019 as National Home Care and Hospice Month in San Angelo, Texas, and encourage all community members to learn more about home care and hospice services.
I'm the community liaison for interim, and we just want to thank the City Council and the City of San Angelo for allowing us to provide hospice services, and we thank y'all so much.
will now open up the meeting for public comment. If you choose to make public comment, please make sure you state your name and address or your SMD number. Each citizen can speak just once per item unless asked to comment by council. Public comment should be 3 minutes unless extended by council or translation services. And the proponent or opponent is allowed 5 minutes unless extended by council or translation services. Council has no obligation to respond to comments or questions from the public. Any response from a member of the City Council to non-agenda comments is limited to a statement of specific factual information, recitation of existing policy, and directing staff to place a subject on a future agenda. I will ask that everyone check your cell phones and make sure they are on silent. And then I ask, is there anyone here today who would like to come forward and make public comment? As there is no response from anyone wanting to make public comment, we will now move into the consent agenda. I will ask council members if there are any items on the consent agenda that they would like to have pulled, starting with Tommy Hebert.
No, ma'am.
Tom?
No, ma'am.
Harry?
No, ma'am.
Lucy?
No, ma'am.
Lane?
Nothing.
Billy?
M.
M. And I'm going to ask to pull C, H, and O. With items C, H, M, and O pulled from the consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve the rest of consent agenda? Moved by Harry, seconded by Billy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor of approving consent agenda with the exception of C, H, M, and O, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we will now move into item C, which is consider approving an amendment to the agreement with Water Dogs LLC for the lease of city property at Mary E. Lee Park at Lake Nasworthy for a boat rental concession and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Hi, Carl, how are you today?
Good morning, Mayor.
Good morning. Just for clarification for the public here, would you explain what this agreement is and what is going on with this?
This is the old Concho Cruises, the dinner boat ride concession. That was transferred a year or two ago to Water Dogs. Water Dogs is still operating under that lease. They're renting boats, they're renting ski-doos, jet skis, and they want to improve the situation. They aren't using the big boat. As you see, it's dry docked. They are trying to sell it. They don't intend to operate it, but they do wish to continue with the agreement, make some improvements at the site. As you see, there's some storage buildings, and it doesn't look real clean, and the appearance isn't real good. They understand that, and they want to improve it, and in doing so, they would like to extend the lease so that they can commit the funds to do those improvements. And so this would, if we negotiate this, this would extend another 20 years with no extension. They would do some improvements, put in a new structure, working with the planning department, improve their rentals, and improve the appearance of the site.
So it's a 20-year lease with no additions added to the 20 years?
That's correct.
Okay.
And we haven't finished we haven't done negotiations. We're asking for authorization to do that. So if there's any direction you have for us, we'll take it.
Well, certainly, I think improvements to that area would be very important, and I certainly don't have a list of priorities in terms of what improvements. I've heard comments that the Scooby-Doos, or whatever they're called, are old and looks like they need to be replaced, but I think you and your staff and the people with Water Dogs have to determine priorities for best end results. So, does council?
What is a Scooby-Doo?
Well, one of those things.
The jet ski.
Yeah, jet ski, I meant.
I think I gave her that word.
See, using Scooby-Doo broadens the arena of what it could be, because it's not an item. It's a thought process.
You obviously got all the council's attention when you said that.
It's what I was hoping for. We seemed like we were asleep this morning, so there you go.
You got us.
Okay,
I had a whole new scene in my head.
Yeah.
What's going on at Lake Nazareth?
painting a new picture, and it's a good one.
I could just hear the voice.
Thank you for council's comments. All right. Yeah, how clear and clean is that?
Make the Ski-Doos better.
Okay, so Scooby-Doos are included.
We now
All
have
right.
a statue of Scooby-Doo going at Lake Nazareth.
Yeah.
That's what's happening?
Okay, so with that, I would make a motion to approve item C.
Second.
Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor of approving item C, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 7-0. We'll move into item H. Consider authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute an agreement and all related documents with the Southern Drag Boat Association for the annual drag boat races at Lake Nasworthy. My question is, do we have any kind of results from last year? I know this was a new one for us, and I just would like to find out what the public reaction, response, and was to the event.
Right. It previously had been run by Lucas Oil, and now it's run under the Southern Drag Boat Association. Good and bad. Bad because attendance was down. There wasn't quite as much interest. I think that's because the Southern Drag Boat Association didn't have as much time to prepare and get the advertising out and get the word out. And so that's why we're trying to work it earlier this year. So we hope that they can improve that. Good in that compared to the way that Lucas Oil operated it, it went a lot smoother. There wasn't as much internal conflict, and so that was a really positive thing. They worked very closely with Spring Creek Marina, the Thule Princess, and other operations out there. It went a lot smoother logistically.
Okay, usually when we say good and bad, we say good, bad, and ugly. Was there any ugly?
No, I can't consider that anything was ugly.
Okay. Well, it's exciting that they want to come back, so I think this is a good thing. So, again, I would make a motion to pass item H. Second by Lucy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. We'll move to item M. Consider ratifying COSA DC's resolution of the City of San Angelo Development Corporation Board of Directors authorizing the board president to negotiate and execute a First Amendment to the Economic Development Performance Agreement with Caltech Software Systems Incorporated, amending the job creation and employee training assistance provisions therein with a commensurate reduction in grant incentives payable. Shannon, you're on. Billy, did you have questions?
Well, my question is, can you shed any light on what is going on? Are they not going to hire as many full-time equivalents as they thought? Or, because that's quite a reduction from over 600,000 grand to 180 plus.
Correct. The original agreement had them creating a minimum of 15, but up to 100 jobs. And in speaking with them to date, they've created 8, but they feel more comfortable that they have a minimum job creation of 10 instead of the 15. When I talked to the fellow at Caltech, they are growing, but they're hiring in other offices outside of San Angelo.
Is that because of technology available here in San Angelo?
I'm not sure.
Does council have any further questions for Shannon?
I don't think so. I just wanted kind of to understand what was going on, but as far as their operation here in San Angelo, they're, it's pretty stable and secure and all.
Yes, and again, within the last 2 years, they have created 8 positions. And again, they have until December of 2020 to reach that new minimum of the 10, so they do feel comfortable that they can reach that, of course, with the maximum going from 100 to 30. So they still have the potential to create up to 30 positions.
Where is their headquarters, Shannon?
It's here.
Here? Okay, all right. Okay. Thank you. With that, Mayor, I make a motion to approve item M.
And a second by Lane. Any public comment? With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 7-0. Item O, consider authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute an annexation agreement and all related documents regarding approximately 977.9 acres of property located outside the city limits adjacent to U.S. Highway 277. John? I notice the agreement is for 15 years. Is this property in our annexation plan at all?
It is within the annexation plan area, but it's in a longer-term So we wouldn't expect it to be annexed for probably 10 or 15 years at least anyway.
Well, when you say at least 10 or 15 years, this agreement is for 15 years.
Right, and so
We're saying we would postpone any need or desire to annex this property, even though we say it's in our 10 to 15-year range?
Well, it's in that, we don't really put years on it, so it's in the medium to long term, so it would very likely be beyond 15 years, which is why we're comfortable with this agreement.
And so 15 is versus 10, why would we go 15 versus 10?
15 is kind of the standard that's established in state law, that you can
Okay.
go up to 15. There can be extensions as well, like another 15-year extension, but that's the standard term length. And I think there are folks here to maybe speak to that from the property owners. There may be some financial reasons that they want the guarantee for 15 years.
Okay, is there anyone here to speak to this? Please come forward. Good morning. Your name, please, and your association.
My name is Diana Rivera, and I'm Director of Development with Merit SI, Merit Sustainable Infrastructure. And we are developing a utility-scale solar energy project.
Can you talk closer to the mic, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We are developing a utility-scale solar energy project here in Tom Green County, located in Wall ISD. And we realized in our discussions with Commissioner Farmer that the project area is within the ETJ. And currently we're going through the process actually tomorrow to present an application with Wall ISD for the maximum value limitation agreement. We will also seek a Chapter 313 agreement with the county. And to ensure this project is competitive and financeable, we seek a development agreement to ensure that the project area will not be annexed by the city in the future, subjecting the project to local property taxes. And in discussions with the local landowners in the project area, our understanding is they would not seek for the land to be annexed. And so with the understanding that historically land has not been annexed unless requested by the landowners, we understand and appreciate that. However, would also like to have an agreement with the city in place that we can show to our investors so that they can be secure in what our liabilities will be going forward for the project.
Okay, thank you. John, any questions, any further questions from council?
Mayor, I do want to state, though, that after the 15 years, we're looking at a voluntary annexation. There won't be a resistance in the future as far as annexing that area. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
As far as a voluntary annexation, it's my understanding that after the 15 years are up, that there won't be a resistance if the city does decide and does work toward the annexation process. And I just want to make sure that that's correct.
That's correct.
So you're asking, Daniel, if at the end of the 15 years, we have the right to annex?
That's correct. I want to
Yeah.
make sure that we make that very clear, that we're not looking at another 15-year extension, but after the 15 years are up, that we are actually looking at annexation.
We will ensure that is taken into account and be fully transparent with our investors that that is a possibility. So we will move forward with the project with that understanding, certainly.
Any further questions? All right, John, so we're going to make sure that the documents attached to this say up to 15 years, not to be extended?
We can do that for sure.
And you have no concern that this property over the next 15 years is property that, in fact, we might want to bring into the city limits?
No, but I would add that the agreement does say that if for some reason this solar project doesn't go forward, or if they decide to develop the property for commercial or residential or some other use, that also would prompt a voluntary annexation.
So this is our agreement is only relative to a solar development, not for any other development.
Correct. It applies to solar. Also, state law requires that it applies to agricultural, wildlife type uses as well. So as long as it remains undeveloped or as a solar project, then it would be not annexed within the 15 years.
Okay. Further questions for John from council? Tom, you look like you have a question.
What would be the difference
even if we did annex it, just to make this, to guarantee that we don't tax, charge property taxes on the area, so that way we don't have to prohibit the ETJ if it expands. We know that this 900 and something acres will be exempt for 15 years. It's robbing Peter to pay Paul either way. I didn't know if it would make it less troublesome for that group later on as we move forward.
Well, there's effectively no difference. Let's say that
Right.
area all of a sudden explodes and the city is growing out in that direction. State law says that an area subject to an annexation agreement like this is as if it's within the city limits for purposes of annexation. So in other words, normally you can't jump over property to annex property on the other side of it, but with a property subject to an annexation agreement like this, you can do that under the state annexation law.
And is this what we would consider from a planning perspective, best use of the property?
I think for that area, sure, there's no indication that growth of, commercial, residential, anything like that would happen within that area within this time frame. So sure, I think it's definitely a more productive use than, say, agricultural in terms of value.
Okay. Further questions? Okay, with that, I will make a motion to approve item O, which is consider authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute an annexation agreement and all related documents regarding approximately 977.9 acres of property located outside the city limits adjacent to U.S. Highway 277. Is there a second?
Second.
And a second by Tommy. And now, public comment. With no public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. With that, we will move out of the the consent agenda and move into our regular agenda. Comments regarding items on the regular agenda may be made by the public when each item is discussed as outlined above. Applicants, proponents, and appellants are expected from the time limit above and instead must limit their remarks to less than 5 minutes. We will start with item A. Consider items related to an amendment to PD 19-04 to modify an improved off-site monument sign to allow digital monument sign in the triangle generally bound by Sherwood Avenue to the north, West Beauregard Avenue to the south, South Tyler Street to the west, and South Harrison Street to the east at 1909 West Beauregard Avenue. And 1, consider an appeal of the Planning Commission's decision to deny the applicant's request for an amendment to plan development PD 19-04. And 2, first reading and public hearing on an ordinance amending PD 19-04. John?
Thank you. John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. You may recall that this was a plan development that was approved a few months ago. In everything highlighted in red there are the properties that are within the PD. This is Concho Collision, and you may be familiar with this little triangle of property. The small Walmart is right across the street there, and so this is where Beauregard and Sherwood split or come together from the other direction. And so Concho Collision had intended for this to be a sign right here at this location. The plan development approved a sign at that location, a small, low-scale monument sign. This amendment would simply amend that plan development to allow that sign to be a digital sign rather than just a static sign. This was recommended by staff. I'll get to that in a minute as well. It went to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission denied it, and so they were concerned about traffic safety of a digital sign with changeable messages at that location. And so what comes to you today is an appeal of that denial. And so the reason that there are 2 items, one is consideration of the appeal. If you choose to overturn the appeal, then you would vote on item 2 to approve the amendment to the plan development. If you decide not to overturn the Planning Commission and uphold their denial, then you would not need to go to number 2. The item would just stop at that point. This is a little bit more of a close-up of that triangle. The yellow there is where they would propose to put the sign. Here is looking at that triangle, so the sign would be somewhere right in this area, visible both from traffic on Beauregard and Sherwood. This is a sample of the sign. Again, it's hard to tell from this, but that would be a digital sign. We did send out our notices everyone within 200 feet. We received 1 in opposition at this location and 3 in favor. Our understanding is that Concho Collision has now purchased this property, and so we could assume that opposition has now gone away now that they own the property. As I mentioned, staff does recommend approval with 4 conditions. One is that the sign must match what's been presented in terms of design and shape and size and all of that. It does say that it cannot create an unsafe distraction, so if later either planning or traffic decide that is a problem, we can bring this back to make changes to the characteristics of the sign. The sign copy must be static. Even though it's digital, it can't have motion or video or anything like that. It has to display a static image for at least 8 seconds. Then that image can disappear and another one can come up for 8 seconds. The reason we have 8 seconds, that's consistent with TxDOT's rules for digital signs like digital billboards. That's the rules that they have, is a minimum of 8 seconds, and that's largely for traffic safety. They don't like to see animation or flashing or messages that change real frequently. And so we've copied that language into this as our recommendation. We would also, I'm sorry. Is there a
Go
question?
ahead, and then I'll have Billy talk. Go ahead and do
The
number 4.
The
and then I'll
last
have her.
condition would be to limit the brightness of the light at night. Sign brightness is measured in a unit called nits. And so based on industry standard, we would limit that to not exceeding 300 nits in the evening so that this sign doesn't become too bright. If you've seen signs that are too bright as you're driving, these kinds of digital signs, they really can be distracting. And so we would help ensure that maintains that low brightness at nighttime.
Billy, would you like a comment, question?
Yes, on item 3, John, that last sentence, display time may be increased by the Planning Commission if determined to be a traffic safety issue. How would you measure that?
We would just, based on just going out and looking at the sign, and if we as staff deem it to be posing a traffic hazard, then we would bring it back to the Planning Commission for their consideration. It is sort of a general, there's no measurable thing that you can say, well, okay, now it's crossed over into being a problem. But I think if a number of people look at it and drive by it and say, hey, that's a problem, I think that would be evidence that we would use to bring it back.
Who would those
for
people be
consideration.
commenting to?
And I just wonder if we did any kind of traffic or accident
There you go.
review to see the level of accidents, that occur in that area. Because even though that used car dealership is, a couple of blocks down, you hear a lot about people driving really fast and, running into cars on that parking lot. I think I've heard 3 or 4 times about cars crashing into the cars on that used car lot. And the other thing that we know, John, is that I think, if I remember correctly, distracted driving is the highest percentage cause of, automobile accidents. So I just wonder why the staff's recommendation is to allow a digital sign. I was driving out on Sherwood Way the other day, and the large one there on the by Walmart, that service station right there, you're trying to drive and you're reading that sign and seeing what's coming up if there's some special somewhere. And I don't know, I guess I just have that concern that it would be a distraction to have a digital sign there.
And that's exactly the concern of the Planning Commission and why it got denied at the Planning Commission. I think staff's recommendation is based on, we felt that a digital sign that just had to remain a static image that couldn't have the changing messages, changing every 2 seconds, or video kind of motion, we felt that was enough to protect the safety. But obviously that's up to you all.
Yeah, I mean, if in fact there's no motion, no video, no anything, why wouldn't one just leave it static?
Well, it can change every 8 seconds, so they can have different messages pop up. So the special of the day or something like that. I think their original thought was to have one of those, the old style changeable message sign where you actually put the letters, on the sign. And more people obviously are going to digital signs where that can be done. You can change your message through a computer indoors and change that message periodically. So it wouldn't just say Concho Collision, then 8 seconds later it could say, today's sale is X, Y, or Z. And then 8 seconds later it could say something else. So it allows them to use different messages throughout the day.
The biggest thing is it's not
Lane, would you like to
scrolling.
talk? Yeah.
It's not scrolling. It changes instantaneous.
Correct. It wouldn't be any motion or scrolling
Transition,
messages.
Motion is the biggest
Right.
thing.
Harry?
Just for clarification, John, this is not a sign way up here. This is a sign that's approximately here and about like this. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's a low sign. I think we have that in here, and maybe Hillary can help me. Is it 6 feet or 5 feet?
The digital portion of the sign is 5 feet tall by 10 feet wide, is my understanding, and then there's a small columns and base to it, so approximately about 6 feet tall. So a little over, probably closer to John's height.
So the digital sign itself is 5 feet, and the fixture that it's going to fit on is over 6 feet. So what is the blockage view-wise?
Well, it would be about 10 feet wide, maybe a little more for the structure, and then 5 feet for the sign with about a 1 foot base, making it about 6 feet tall.
Because right
So-
now, when you drive that way, you see the visibility is very strong, and my concern would be you put up that size of a sign, visibility is going to be impacted.
I think that's absolutely correct, that there will be some visibility limitations. I think the thinking was by placing it back to this end, the farther you put it this way, I think the more problems it creates. And so by pushing it back here, it's at least less problematic.
Repeat again why the Planning Commission rejected it 2 to 3.
Again, they were concerned about the traffic safety of a digital sign that had changing messages. I think Councilwoman DeWitt's concern was that sort of same commentary was made by the planning commissioners.
Do I have further questions? Tommy?
I have one for the proponent, if the proponent is here.
Hi, I'm Jim Osborne. I'm owner of Concho Collision. How are y'all?
Good. Thank you for being here today.
I had some slides prepared, and I don't know if they made this. So is this it? Oh, here we go. Thank you. This sign kind of evolved. We were going to just do a monument sign, which we got passed, but we were going to slide letters in and out, and I thought that's kind of crazy when we have the technology. So we decided to put a LED up. If you look at our photographs, these are from both directions, and it does not block any traffic views at all. The sign is not as wide as it was on the one photograph, but as you're driving down the street, it's going to be basically almost like a static sign, because we're going to display a message for 8 seconds. And we're very flexible. I mean, this sign we're proposing to put up, it has auto-dimming features. It's very high. It's a high technology LED sign, which I think would look really good there. But there's other things that go with the sign. We're not only trying to put a sign up for our benefit. We're trying to make this island better. And I purchased the island to put a sign up, but also do a beautification project for the city and ourselves. This is a picture of the beautification project And it has the sign in there represented. There's just a line. But this has been drawn up by Farmer's Daughter, and it's about almost $70,000 project just to do the landscape, the lighting, the water, and all that. And I think it's going to be a nice deal. But we wanted to put the sign in there and make it tactful. I mean, make it look good where it's not tacky, and just to display our business. We employ about 48 employees at this time. We created a glass company, and we're growing that right now. Our employees that we employ are high production, high paid employees that live in the city. We're looking to put another maybe 10 on. And I think that this project, the sign, will help us achieve that. And it's something good for the city. If you look at that island, it's been vacant for 40 years. What's on it? Mesquites?
I don't even think a tree grows there.
Well, there's a mesquite there that
Is
we
it?
keep cutting down.
It must be non-visible, because I drive by that 100 times a day, I swear, and I've never seen the tree there. I've seen the signs there.
But let me go back to the images, because I don't think that this is going to be a distraction or block any traffic. We went out and took photographs, and this is an actual, we put the same size sign up. On the sides are rock. It's a rock foundation on the sides, and we can make that smaller to make the footprint smaller. But the sign itself, let's see if I have any other pictures here. I guess that's it. But the sign itself is, we're pretty flexible on that. And at night, like I said, it's going to auto dim. If you guys recommend for us to maybe even turn it off at night, I don't care. That's fine. Because most of everyone's driving the streets during the day. And if I can be flexible and you guys can be flexible, I think we can get this thing done.
Thank you. Do I have questions from council? Yes, Tommy?
He addressed it a little bit. Jim, talk a little bit more. You started off initially, you said, with just a monument sign that you were going to have to use, you or someone was going to have to change the letters.
Right. It was going to be the same size.
Okay.
Which passed. It didn't, once we changed it to an LED, things changed. Because I think everybody has this, and I do too, because when I pass by some of these signs here in town, I don't think they're set up on auto dimming, and they're not. You see the one on the expressway, it's very bright. But this one is a very expensive sign. The $68,000 doesn't even include the sign. We're putting some money in this project, and that's our plan.
So your thought process was, you initially thought monument. What was it? Just the inconvenience of changing the message on the sign? What really prompted you to move towards a technology sign?
Yeah, we were just limited because we were going to have our name up there, and then we were going to slide in and out what we wanted it to say. So we're doing auto glass. We created an auto glass business also, so we were going to slide in, $25 rock chips, right? Well, how do I display anything about my body shop, like certified techs or whatever whatever our message might be? We'd have to daily go out there and change it out. I just don't think that's going to look good. What would that sign look like in 2 or 3 years? Letters sliding in and out, getting faded. Maybe we're not taking care of it. But this sign that we're going to put up, it comes with a 7-year warranty. It's a really nice sign. And
This might be a unrealistic comment or question, but I'm going to ask it. And that is there a way to change the changing of the message on that sign with the light changes, so that when people are at the light and it's red, you could read the message, but as you're driving into the light, it's static, not changing. Because what you find is, it's one thing if you're at the light, you can read it and see the 8 seconds and see a new message, but as you're driving into it, to Billy's comment about safety, if you're driving into it and there's 2 or 3 messages that go by as you're driving into it, you're going to be more distracted than if you're sitting at the light watching it change. Is that impossible?
Possible, I guess. You'd
John,
have to
can
get
you
with-
answer that question?
Get with Shane and find out the timing.
I was going to say it may be more a question for Shane, but I think that's part of the reason for the 8 seconds. I think if that's your concern, I would recommend just lengthening that 8 seconds so that, maybe make it a minute at a time each message. That way once a minute it might change and while someone's driving by, but largely people are going to drive by it and see it as just a single
That, to
static
me,
sign.
takes away some of the risk and hazard. If we can extend the number of seconds to a minute so that one reads the message, moves on, and isn't trying to read 2 or 3 messages as they're driving up to it.
We're willing to do that. It's not like,
Okay.
a body shop or a glass shop has so many messages we want to
Correct.
put out there anyway.
So if we could do that,
Yes.
I could support it by lengthening to 1 minute the message, so we're not constantly looking for new messages.
Mayor.
Yes, Billy?
John, on those item 3 or 4 that you had up there earlier, did you say something about after a period of time we could reassess if it wasn't working right? Did you say anything like that?
Yes,
It
it
could be
wasn't-
brought back if.
It could be. It's not an automatic. It's not like after 1 year we bring it back for reconsideration. But it does say, honestly, it's true in any case, we could bring it back. But this was something we thought was important to state specifically that if we get complaints and/or we think it's a problem, we would bring it back if that becomes
But
an
we
issue.
could change item 3 from 8 seconds to 1 minute,
Absolutely.
and then you probably aren't going to have to worry about the traffic safety issues. So what I would suggest we make is a motion to approve it with item 3 change from 8 seconds to 1 minute.
I'll make that motion.
And Lane's going to make that motion.
Just to clarify, we are making a motion to overturn the Planning Commission's decision to deny, and we'll be approving the amendment to the plan development with this modification.
Modification
Correct,
number
Lane?
3 to 1 to 1
Yes,
minute.
to 1 minute.
8 seconds.
Okay, would I have a second for that? Second. Okay, public comment? Yes, Tom, you may.
You're the only person that's going to put signage on this, right? You're not going to sell signage to somebody else comes by and
No,
goes,
I don't think
"Hey,
we can do that. So,
Okay.
no, it's our sign.
No, for what you're doing, it's absolutely wonderful. I mean, it gets a message across. I'm totally with you in support of that. Sometimes when these things go real good and some guy comes in and goes, I want to give you $1,000 to throw up Daniel's, car wash or whatever it is, and they come in and do that, people tend to go down a sad. But as long as it's yours and you maintain it with the marketing of your development and your business, I'm cool with that. I think this is great.
Okay.
All right, is there any public comment? Steve?
Steve Hampton, District 6. I agree with I think what you're doing. I think it ought to be approved. This man advertises a great deal, and I know that if this sign did not work out for him, it would bring him bad PR. So I don't think he's wanting to move ahead. And I like the community and improvements that he's talking about too. So I think it ought to be passed. But something else you mentioned during the presentation that I wanted to highlight is that the area for notification on whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, one of them was purchased. I think this goes to something that we need to consider in the future about expanding that area of notification.
Thank you very much. With any further public comment? With no further public comment, we will take a vote. All in favor, as presented, changing 8 seconds to 1 minute, say aye. Aye. With none opposed, motion passes. Item 1. So now do we do item 2? Or doing what we did? I forget.
I think the way Julia described it, it was a vote on both items 1 and 2, unless.
Everybody's nodding their heads, so we're good to move on. We're moving on. Okay, item B, consider a resolution approving case SU 19-04, a special use to allow nursing home on property zoned heavy commercial CH, being 8.25 acres generally located on YMCA Drive, 850 foot northwest of the intersection of YMCA Drive and Sunset Drive. And of course, John, you're back on again.
Thank you. Again, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. You can see Sunset and YMCA Drive here. This is the subject property. This is a special use for a nursing facility. Largely, nursing facilities aren't allowed by right, but they're reviewed on a case-by-case basis through a special use. It is the future land use of the area is neighborhood, although the zoning is heavy commercial. This is just looking in the general area. There's homes across the street. There's also an apartment complex. So we think a nursing home facility is appropriate for this general area. This is just a conceptual plan. They're not held to this, but just to give you an idea of what they're thinking, this is YMCA Drive here. I won't read through all of these. You've got this information in your packet, but again, staff is recommending approval. We think it's less intense than it is zoned heavy commercial, so a lot of heavy intensive things could go on this property. Nursing facility is definitely on the low end in terms of intensity, and given the residential across the street and the single family homes and apartments, we think this is much better than some of the other things that could happen in this area. We think traffic generation for a nursing facility like this is less than, again, many of those other things that could happen commercially on this area. We did send out our notices, received 3 in favor, none in opposition. The Planning Commission did recommend approval with 4 conditions. Staff also recommends approval. The conditions of approval recommended are providing sidewalks along YMCA Drive, replat the property, signage has to get permits, sign permits. Again, that's just restating what's already required. Sometimes we find it's helpful to let the developers know those things, as well as a landscaping plan to ensure, especially that area across the street from the homes looks nice in terms of the aesthetics. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do I have questions from council?
I'd move approval as presented, Mayor.
We made a move. Harry seconded. Do we have public comment? I will make one public comment. I attended the ribbon cutting of the facility that this company took over this past Thursday evening, and based off of the residents' comments and people who have family members at that facility, the reaction to the quality that is being delivered and given is incredible, and I would hope that this facility would duplicate the facility that they've just taken over and done. It was very impressive, so I'm excited about this opportunity. With that, any further public comment? If not, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion passes 7-0. Item C, first reading and public hearing on case Z19-16, an ordinance rezoning property from the Ranch and Estate R&E zoning district to the light manufacturing ML zoning district on 10 acres located at 3927 Old Ballinger Highway. John, you're on.
Thank you. As you mentioned, this is a rezoning to light manufacturing. You'll see on the next slide how that relates to the surrounding area. It is on Old Ballinger Highway, and the proposal is for a mechanic shop for trucks. You can see the long-term plan for this area is all industrial. You can see right now it's largely ranch and estate, although the heavy manufacturing zoning comes up adjacent to this property. And again, the long term, as this area develops, the long-term plans are for it to be more of an industrial type area.
What would ranch and estate allow to be developed there?
Ranch and estate is largely for agricultural uses and large lot homes, so 5-acre home type development, which there is some in this area. And some of these lots do have a combination of other uses, but also some homes in the area as well.
So what happens to the zoning on them?
For now, they would stay ranch and estate. Again, long-term, the long-term plan for this whole area is industrial, so we would expect to see that those vacant uses become commercial and industrial uses. Those homes can stay as long as they want to be there, but they would know that the area developing around them is largely going to be heavy commercial and
Were they
industrial.
notified of the zoning change?
They were, if they were within the 200 feet. Let me go to that map. I'll come back to these pictures. Again, on large properties like this, you can see the 200 feet doesn't get to all of these properties over here. But you can see in yellow the properties that were notified, but we did not receive any responses in favor.
Did we
or
post
in
a sign out
opposition.
front that said the zoning change had been requested?
Yes, we do. We do that. Just quickly, a few pictures of the area. Here's the subject property. The landfill is actually property across Old Ballinger Highway there. And then west, you can see the homes that exist in the area are largely like this. Like this is wooded, so anything mechanic shop or industrial type use would be fairly screened from those residential uses. Another similar use, this is actually larger scale, but the kinds of industrial properties that are in the general vicinity.
And so light manufacturing, define what could and what could not be done there.
Light manufacturing would allow mostly any of the heavy commercial or manufacturing type uses. The only really difference between light manufacturing and heavy manufacturing is the scale, the amounts of outdoor storage, things like noise and dust, and the things that have a larger impact on surrounding properties would be in the heavy or the heavy
I only ask the
industrial.
questions because we know the issues with Hirschfield Steel and the property owners who had the homes there, and were quite concerned about the noise, et cetera, to their homes. And so we've had an instance come up before City Council where the homeowners felt like they were having a difficult situation living with the industrial use next door to them. So I'm wondering why we would not, even though they're not in the 200-foot area, want to make sure those homeowners were aware of what was going on.
As you mentioned, we do put up the sign. In the past, we have, in some cases, taken it upon ourselves to notify a larger area. A former council informed us that no, we should be notifying what's required by state law. I have some concerns about making that decision. Well, when do we notify 500 feet, or when do we notify just the 200 feet required? And so I think for us, it's, I guess, better to just notify what's required in state law and our ordinance. If you all think that should be greater, I think I would recommend we have that discussion and perhaps change our ordinance to increase that distance. But I feel a little uncomfortable making a judgment call on each case, notify a little more in this case, a little less in this case.
Well, I think we shouldn't put you in that position. I don't think we want you to be held to that kind of negotiation. I don't think that's right for us to do that to you. But if it is something that comes up on a regular basis, then perhaps we do need to review it. And my greatest issue is always when a homeowner is close by. In many cases, I don't think it's a necessarily bigger issue, but home ownership, I think, is someone's largest asset that they own, and the quality of their life on that property is always of great concern to mine. And so, but that's for a further discussion, not today's discussion, so we won't further the discussion on that. This discussion will stay contained.
As I mentioned, staff does recommend approval, as did the Planning Commission unanimously. With that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Do I have questions from council? Lucy, you look like you
Oh, I
have
just
a
wanted
question.
To make, no, I just wanted to make a statement that I hadn't received any kind of phone calls or anything opposing this, so I make a motion to approve as presented.
A second. Billy, did you have a question, or were you seconding it?
Second.
Okay, so I'm going to double second that with Harry and with Billy. So with that, we will ask for public comment. With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0. We will move on to item D, which is the first reading and public hearing on an ordinance amending the Land Development and Subdivision Ordinance, Chapter 1, 9 and 10, to address adequate public facilities, to rename Chapter 9, to amend design requirements to refer to city engineer specifications, and to create administrative exemption for reduced street standards in infill areas. John?
Thank you. Again, John James, Director of Planning and Development Services. These are the infill ordinance amendments to the subdivision ordinance that we've been talking about for a couple of months now. Basically what it does is create an administrative exception. Right now, if someone platting property, for example, wants to construct a street at a lesser width than the current city standard for streets, they have to seek an appeal or a variance from the Planning Commission. This would allow an administrative process that in certain circumstances that can be approved by staff and not have to go to the Planning Commission. And these are some of the cases where this would apply. Re-subdivision to reorient lots. We see that a lot in some of the older areas of town where all of the lots face one street and they want to take 3, 4, 5 lots and reorient them to face another street. Well, that's a re-subdivision that's going to trigger all subdivision requirements, including improving the street to the current standard, possibly extending water and sewer lines, and all of the things that come along with platting property. Also, within designated infill areas, as part of some other discussions, as you know, we've designated some specific areas that we're calling infill. This would also allow this to apply within those areas. Pre-existing subdivisions where streets were never constructed, we have some of those that were platted, say, in 1910. Nobody ever constructed the streets. This would allow us to say, well, yeah, you do have to come in and construct streets. We can't have homes without streets, but we'll let you do it at a narrower width. It also applies to small-scale residential development, so it wouldn't apply to, say, a big commercial development or, say, apartments.
When you say small-scale residential, is the small scale necessary, or it just applies to residential development, not commercial development, more appropriate to state?
Well, in the actual ordinance language, that's better defined. This is sort of my bullet summary of that. But in the planning world, we call apartments residential. I know in the building permit world, they call that commercial. And so we want to make clear that it doesn't apply to apartments. And so really, I think we drew the line at 8 units or less. So even an 8-unit apartment building would be eligible for this. But once you get into larger apartment complexes, this exception
So that
would
means
not be allowed.
duplexes,
Absolutely.
townhouses,
Right.
this would apply as long as there were less than 8.
Right.
Or 8 or less.
Right. It would allow, one of the things that can be requested is maintaining the existing street width. Or, we might require it to be expanded, but not to the full standard width of a city street. This is a list of the standards that can be modified. The existing street may be approved at its current width or a lesser width, as I mentioned. A new street, that's an existing street, and then a new street, basically the same applies. You have to construct a street if there's not one, but it can be a lesser width. And one of the things that we'll look at is the existing streets in the area. So there's some areas in Lakeview, for example, that our normal standard street, if you go out and build one today, it would be 40 feet wide. There's whole neighborhoods up there that are like 32 feet wide or 30
26.
feet wide. And some down to 26. And so we would look at the surrounding area, and we wouldn't make you build a 40-foot street if the next block over is 32 feet. This also allows for waiving curb and gutter, or allowing what's called a header curb or a flat ribbon curb instead of the stand-up curb and gutter. But it does, this is basically based on the fire code. It would never allow a street less than 26 feet in width. So if there's an existing street out there that's 24, this wouldn't allow us to it wouldn't allow us to approve it to stay 24. In no case could they do a street less than 26. The administrative exception has to be approved by both the planning director and the city engineer. This is partly because there's the subdivision ordinance and then there are street standards. We want to make sure that I don't have the authority to overrule the city engineer if there are technical street reasons that they think curbs should be a certain way or a certain street width.
What if you say one thing and he says another?
Then the variance request would go to the planning commission. So you can always still go to the normal variance route through the planning commission. This is just for the administrative, simpler process. It would have to be approved by both. There's a couple of cleanup items in here as well. One of them is that it confirms our existing policy that all development must have adequate facilities. There's been some question in some of these areas where facilities were never built. Well, do I actually have to build a road? It seemed pretty obvious to us that if you're going to build a house, you need a road in front of it, but it never really says that in the ordinance. We've always enforced it that way. This just clarifies that. Based on some other changes to the ordinance, we thought it was appropriate to rename Chapter 9 because it includes development standards, not only subdivision standards. And then another cleanup item, there's a list of plan submission requirements in Chapter 10. We've deleted that and referred to the city engineer's specifications. So the size of the Mylar sheet, 24 by 36 inches, that kind of detail doesn't have to be in the ordinance. That can just be in the standards that already exist through the city engineer. So we've taken out 2 or 3 pages of the ordinance of stuff that's really redundant and doesn't have to be in the ordinance. That's a quick overview. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't see anywhere in here any reference to sidewalks, so my assumption is that there's no requirement for sidewalks.
We already have a separate process where that's reviewed, so, and that is, I guess the short answer is that's dealt with separately from this. As you may know, we're already working on a separate sidewalk chapter for an update to the subdivision ordinance. That's gone to the Development Task Force. The Development Task Force created a subcommittee that we've also met with.
Do they have a subcommittee too?
No, not multiple
Ends there, right?
subcommittees.
Yeah.
Well, and basically, the subcommittee is just the people from the Development Task Force who had a big interest in sidewalks. We met separately with them because, we have plumbers and electricians, and people who show up to our Development Task Force don't necessarily care about sidewalks. But that will be moving forward fairly soon, and it has its own appeal process, which also does have an administrative process that can be approved by staff.
Okay. Do I have further questions from council? Billy?
John, did I understand you to say if there's an infill lot and there's a street but no curb, they would not be required to build a curb?
Well, they would be eligible for that. So we could review that, and it could be waived, but it's not automatic. So it would be a case-by-case determination. So, for example, we had a recent plat where it was a few lots in a row, and they didn't want to put curb and gutter, but every street in every other direction had curb and gutter. And so in that case, we said no curb and gutter. We recommended that they have to install it. We have other cases where for a block in any direction, there's no curb and gutter. So that's a case where we would likely say, well, you don't have to do it either.
Tom?
John, on this first paragraph here, so we talk about existing policy developments must be served by adequate public facilities, road, water, et cetera. So what if I initially lay out that I've got 12 different lots that I'm going to do? I get 3 lots into it. I'm not going to develop the other 9. Am I still responsible for development of sewer, water, and pipeline? I mean, does that stop at this lot? Does it have to go out to the other 9? You see where I'm going? It's kind of vague in that area.
Yeah, well, it stops at the lots that you're platting. So we have a process. You can do a preliminary plat for your whole development. And so you could preliminary plat all 12 lots, but then you could do a final plat for just the first 3 lots. You only have to put in the infrastructure at the time you're final platting. So you would have to run water and sewer and roads to those 3 lots, but not the other 9 until you get to the final plat for those. Now, if you decide to final plat all 12 at once, then yeah, you're going to have to run the roads and water and sewer and everything all at once.
Do I have further questions or comments from anyone? All right, do I have a motion for approval? Harry made a motion for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
And a second by Tommy. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 7-0. We will move on to item E. Consider awarding ES-08-19 Avenue P Detention Basin to Darnell Construction LLC, San Angelo, Texas, in the amount of $2,351,118 budgeted for purchase in the fiscal year 2020, and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. Lance, you are on.
Morning, Mayor, Council, Mr. Valenzuela, Lance Silver Street Engineering Services. And today we have something before you guys that has been around for quite some time. It's been
50 years.
50 years of
I was
problems.
told, I don't know.
And so we actually have been looking forward to this project actually moving ahead. It actually was previously the very first project that I worked on when I came to the city. And so it's actually kind of
49 years ago?
No way. No, man. Yeah. A whole 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And if it was that far along, I think I would already be moved on. But anyway, it's a great time to just be able to bring this project to you guys. And I just want to do a little recap of what this Avenue P area represents, what some of the previous projects were, and where we are today, and what the purpose is of that today. As you guys are aware, the Avenue P project actually incorporates about 642 acres of area of drainage. That goes down Avenue E, Austin Street, some of Knickerbocker, goes all the way up to past ASU. So it's a fairly large drainage area that's all funneling down into one point, which ends up being Avenue P, which is why we have a problem. And it's a pretty big drainage area that is contended with. When I first came onto the city back in 2014, the project that had been approved was an underground drainage facility where they were going to take the water at Avenue P and take it underground. That project only gave us about a 1 to 2 year storm event. And so not a whole lot of really protection for the street at the price tag of that $2.1 million that we were looking at spending. And then it also too had some other fatal flaws in that we did not have all the property acquired to actually complete that project. And so that's why the previous project was shelved. And as a part of that project, we took those funds forward and we tasked an engineering firm to say, hey, this is the funds that we have available. What can we do in an area in terms of a detention pond? What's the biggest bang of protection we can gain for that? And so what that actually has come to is we have actually created a detention pond. And for just to refresh you guys and the public what a detention pond is it's a structure that's designed to take that big slug of water, that really large surge, hold that water back, and then release it over a smaller period of time at a smaller rate. And so what ends up happening is rather than having the 642 acres drain and all come, rushing down, there is a fairly large pond where that water will settle in. It's actually metered in a weir, so that way as that water level comes out, it slows it down and releases at a slower rate. But then hopefully within 24 hours, then all that water is out of the pond. But what it's going to do as far as the Avenue P is it's just going to have a smaller water flow down the street, which will still be navigable, still be able to be in and out and accessed and things like that. And so that's what the detention pond actually does. And at this location, the features that are going to be a part of this pond is that we're going to have the concrete head wall, which is the weir, the outfall. They're going to be actually excavating 52,000 cubic yards. And so I had to kind of throw in the dump truck idea for you guys so you kind of had a perception of what 52,000 cubic yards is. That's about 5,500 10-yard dump trucks.
Where do those loads go?
That is a good question. That we actually have worked to possibly take that to the landfill. The contractor also has the ability that if there's material there that he wants, he could take care of that. But there are a couple of different options that we have for that.
Is it available for someone to purchase?
That has not been determined. That might create some problems with staging and loading and other things like that. If the contractor chose to keep some of that material, that would really be him, and it'd be for him to coordinate, and it would really, the city wouldn't own that, so that's really a contractor coordination item. And we've left it that way so that way that the city doesn't have to get involved in all of that particular portions of it. But there may be some good material that someone might want. The concrete spillway is also going to have diffusers in it to help slow that flow rate down. So that way, if the structure is overloaded or inundated or at its max capacity, it will continue to slow that flow rate down. So that way, it will be a much less cubic feet per minute, much slower velocity going down the street. And then also, too, this project has some water and sewer infrastructure that are actually running through the pond and through the outfall that are going to have to be relocated. And so there's several different steps involved in making this happen. And so one thing that we do have for you guys is the engineering firm actually created a video rendering of what this is going to look like. And so we're going to cue that video at this point and just kind of let you guys the visual of that.
When does the rain start?
Hopefully when we're done. Hopefully when we're done.
Here come the clouds, Mayor.
Yeah. And so this will be the outfall structure that'll funnel that all down Avenue P. But as you can see, there is a shelf there to prevent the water from coming in. It'll hold it back. There will be a V-notch in the structure to allow that water to come through at a slower rate. But it's a fairly substantial structure that's being constructed.
It's amazing.
So you guys are looking at some of the fencing there that's at the new Intertel and things like that. This will be the outfall coming under the railroad from Avenue Ends and things like that. And more of that, and then looking back to the south towards Knickerbocker is the other side of that. And so it's a fairly substantial. Yeah.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, it's a fairly substantial structure. And one thing that we are letting everybody kind of be informed about is what this will actually provide in terms of protection, why we chose this, and what the downstream residents can expect. So we are looking at this detention pond being able to handle somewhere in that 5, almost 10-year storm event. One reason that it is only at that 5 or 10-year event is because we were tasked with the amount of dollars that had available to construct the most that we could at that rate. And that's the storm level of protection that it's going to be. And so at any storm event, it would have about a 10% chance that that structure would be exceeded. Now, what that is going to mean in terms of when it does get exceeded is it's still going to hold back that original storm surge. It's just that at that 10-year event, it will start overflowing and free-flowing. So, for instance, a 15-year storm would realistically take that down to what would be a 5-year type storm coming down the street. And so the reason that we also chose that is we have been seeing in a lot of our other projects in terms of our Southwest Avenue and our College Hills is that 10-year event seems to be really kind of the breaking point for the protection you gain versus the dollars you're spending. If you start exceeding that 10-year storm event, your price tag goes up considerably. Now, with what is being constructed, there is also the options and opportunities. Down the road, we could actually invest more and get a bigger storm. We can go deeper with mechanical pumping means. We can actually cut the earthen berms on the sides back and do concrete walls to increase that. But all of those are going to have a significant increase in our dollars and O&M costs. And so for a resident that lives on Avenue P, what it's going to look like for them is that, you know, if you have less than that 10-year storm event, you're going to be able to get in and out of your street, have that access and availability for you to get in and out of your residence. The downstream flooding that would have occurred at that time is going to go away, and then there will still be some benefit at those larger storm events because that pond is still going to function and hold back that initial surge. And one thing that we have and are letting other people know is there's many places in town that when we get a 10-year event and more, they do have low water crossings. There is some navigability issues when we get those storm events. Avenue P will still have some of those effects. It's just they're not going to have to necessarily stay up all night anytime there's a chance of rain because that pond is going to function and definitely benefit their quality of life there at Avenue P.
Yeah, Harry.
Since this is one of the first things I started working on 3.5 years ago, the only thing I want to know is when do we start and how long it's going to take?
Make a motion, we'll second it and pass it, and we'll get going.
We've got letters ready to go. One thing that we are going to be looking at doing is I believe that there's roughly an 18-month construction period. Don't hold me to that. I'd have to verify that. But the rain cycle is definitely going to have a big thing, because once you start digging that hole and taking out that material, when it rains, that's where it's going to go. And so there will be some staging, some sequencing. We'll probably do a portion of that pond and then the other portion of it, so that way construction can continue. But the weather dependency is going to be very critical in the overall construction and completion of this project.
So you're saying that you believe that this is about an 18-month project from the date that we assigned the contract?
Yes, we're looking at an 18-month to 24-month period for them to do the water and sewer, the head wall, and then hoping
So now
that,
it's 18 to 24 months or a 2-year process?
again, I would
I'll
have to.
change it now to
I'd have to
36,
verify
because it went from
Quit
18
asking
to
Mary.
24 overnight.
Well, I say
It
18.
depends on the rain.
I say
Whether it
18, but
rains.
you know, the hope is that we will have some rain in the next 18 months, and so we are expecting
Pray for rain.
some delay.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, do I,
Question about
Lane?
Upstream, does this kind of fix the problem that we have on the Dakota Coffee parking lot?
No, this is actually downstream of that. We did look at.
Well, are
the-
there efforts going into that? Because their parking lot's pretty much functioning as the basin, also channeling it towards this.
Yes, and I could have a little sidebar discussion with you, in that the way that that parking lot was designed was not how it was planned, and that's part of the reason why they're having the problems that they are.
Further questions from council? Daniel?
Mayor, I just want to point out and make it very clear that because this detention pond is going in doesn't mean that it will never flood. Okay, that is really important to emphasize, because they are it's gonna greatly assist. You know, anytime that you have a smaller rain event, you don't have to worry about the flooding that we're getting right now. But again, what it really does is it puts individuals in Avenue P in a level playing ground with other areas of the city as well. So again, a 5 to 10 year rain event, it's much better than what they're receiving at this point. But again, I don't want anyone to ever point and say, hey, it did flood. You guys spent all this money, and it's still flooded. So I want to make sure that they understand that it's going to alleviate much of the rain that we'd be receiving, but it's not an assurance against.
It's not 100%
That is
proof.
correct. I just want to make sure that's clear.
That's a fine in one of my nonprofits, Lucy.
He says that if your phone goes off in one of his nonprofit meetings, you get a fine. Yeah.
Don't embarrass me more than I already am.
All right, so we have a motion by Harry and a
Second.
second by Lucy. Public comment?
Steve Hampton, I have a question. You're defining these as a 5 and 10 year rain event, but you're not telling what does that equate to inches per in an hour or something like that?
The inches per hour, I don't have that number right in front of me in terms of what that is. I know that the 100-year event and the 50-year events are somewhere in that 6 to 7 inches, so I'm just going to kind of guess that it's somewhere
In a one-day period?
in a frequency occurrence of the rain event. And so they're all broken down. When you look at those tables, Mayor and Council, is that you'll have what they call a 2-year event, and it'll be broken down in 1 hour, 2 hours, 6 hours in intervals. And so a larger storm over a smaller period of time, changes what the inch per hour rate is.
Sure, and a fast rain per hour
Sure,
changes the
sure.
dynamics.
And so typically, I'm going to guess that's probably in that 2 to 3 inch range, approximately. What we are currently in the process of doing is updating those rainfall intensity curves and tables because of the new information that's being put out by USGS and NOAA, which will increase some of those values. And those were taken into account in this design.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With none opposed, motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item F, consider the following: accepting the rescindment of award recommendation from KSA Engineers and rejecting the bid from American Road Maintenance for failure to produce the mandatory disadvantaged business enterprise plan and the bid documents for Airport Improvement Program AIP 39 Runway 18/36 rehabilitation and commercial ramp rehabilitation. Presentation will be made by KSA. And 2, rejecting all bids and restructuring and rebidding AIP 39 runway 18/36 rehabilitation and commercial ramp rehabilitation due to the lack of available FAA grant funding. No, you're not Jeremy. And you are?
My name is Craig Phipps, and I'm with KSA Engineers. I'm a vice president, vice president and the director of our aviation services. With me is Dan Neely. Dan is a project manager engineer who has been working on projects for the city of San Angelo at the airport. The purpose of my presence today is to present our position for the rescindment of our award recommendation to American Road Maintenance. Essentially, the project is the rehabilitation of runway 1836 to do rubber removal, paint removal, crack sealing, and rehabilitation of the pavement, as well as doing rehabilitation of the commercial service apron, the concrete pavement of that. We had an additive alternate to do additional concrete pavement rehabilitation. This project is being funded by a grant from the Federal Aviation Administration at a 90%. The city is providing 10% local share on that. Bids were opened on September the 10th. We received 3 bids for the project. The low bidder was American Road Maintenance. Their bid was within the project budget. Their bid was within 10% of KSA's estimate. The additive alternate was also added onto that project for roughly about a $1.2 million project. There was a grant that was submitted to the FAA for that project. The FAA requested a 1-day turnaround. Essentially, open bids this day, submit your grant application the next day, and we'll write your grant the following day. So in terms of our recommendation, we followed that schedule, that request by the FAA. American Road Maintenance did submit a complete bid. They submitted all required documentation. That included the FAA's and the city's form that's included in the front-end documents for disadvantaged business enterprise. The city has a set DBE goal of 6.64% for projects at the airport. For the base bid, ARM met that and submitted 8.58%. So what they submitted initially in their bid documents showed that they met the DBE goal. Based upon that information, KSA moved forward with our award recommendation. After the city sent out a notice of award to ARM, the second bidder, Maxwell Asphalt, submitted a protest. Essentially, they said that ARM did not meet the DBE requirement. They also said that ARM is not performing 50% of the work. There is no requirement in the documents for ARM to perform 50% of the work, so that's not really valid. To clarify this, we asked that the purchasing department submit a request to ARM providing detail for their disadvantaged business plan. Essentially, who's going to do the work and at what percentages are they going to do the work. ARM was not able to do that. They sent a general letter without providing detail, and without that detail, we felt that it was not appropriate to move forward with the award recommendation. This is a federal requirement. It's Section 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations that says that they must meet that DBE percentage or they must provide a good faith effort. And based upon what was submitted to us, we didn't feel that they had met it or made that good faith effort. And that's why we provided a rescindment letter to the city for that award recommendation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that.
Do I have questions from council? Billy, you're on first.
What is the disadvantaged business?
Certainly, it's disadvantaged business enterprise, and it essentially requires that for federal grant dollars, contractors must give opportunity to disadvantaged business enterprise, whether they're woman-owned or black or Hispanic.
A minority-owned.
A minority, yes, ma'am. So it gives them
equal opportunity.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
And they have to do a certain percentage of those
yes.
jobs, and
yes.
they were not able to say that we do that?
Yes, for y'all's airport, the goal is just above 6%. It's about 6.5%.
Which is pretty low anyway.
It is pretty low, yes, ma'am. And so while their initial form says, hey, we meet this, and so they submitted a complete package, per se. But when we asked for the details of that, They were not able to provide that. And if they had done their due diligence ahead of the bidding, they would have had all that information and been able to provide it for us.
'Cause they would have contracted the subcontractors.
Yes, ma'am.
And the only reason that came to our attention is because another company that had bid on it filed a protest?
That is correct. My understanding, based upon a little bit of research with the two contractors, is that they do have a bit of tit for tat, and they did file a protest. This would have been very simple to clarify had ARM submitted the proper documentation, just basically providing the details of how they were going to meet that DBE goal.
They never presented that detailed information in the original application. Was it required in the original application to present that detail?
In the original application, there is a form that says list who your DBE contractor is, list the dollar value, and list what they're going to do in general terms.
So how did we approve it with that not being filled out?
It was filled out, yes, ma'am. That was
Okay.
submitted, and it did meet the goal for the base bid. It was just under the goal for the base bid plus additive alternate, but because it was so close, we felt that there was a good faith effort there to meet it. Because they were not able to provide really the details behind that, show us how you generated this dollar figure, where does that money come from, because they did not provide us that detail. We don't feel comfortable moving forward with that award recommendation.
Billy, did you have further question?
No, that was, thank you.
Do I have questions from council? Okay, so with that, what we are today doing is making a motion to accept the rescindment of the award and at the same point in time rejecting all bids. Do we make two different motions or one motion?
Since we haven't heard from Jeremy yet, if you want to make a motion on this first item, that would be appropriate now.
Do I have someone on council who would like to make a motion to accept F1?
I'll make a motion.
Lane's F1 motion to accept the rescindment of the awards,
Second.
seconded by Tommy. Public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Item F1 approved 7-0. Now we will go on to item 2, rejecting all bids and restructuring and rebidding AIP 39 runway 18/36 rehabilitation and commercial ramp rehabilitation due to the lack of available FFA grant funding. Okay, so Jeremy, are you going to comment on this one?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Jeremy Valgaardson, representing the airport. I think Craig did a good job at explaining exactly what we were doing with the project, so I'll kind of skip over that. But here's the main parallel runway, runway 1836, and then here's the portions we were doing. The blue was the base bid, and the red was the alternative bid that he's talking about. And with that new 175 aircraft that comes in, it taxis right over the top of this asphalt that's the concrete that's breaking up. So it is a critical project, and that's why we included the scope. We were hoping that the bids would come in a little lower than they did so we could get all this work done. But here's the moral of the story. The base bid for America Road Maintenance was within the engineer's budget. The next closest bidder was Maxwell Asphalt, and base bid alone is $1,447,000. You throw in the alternatives, you look at the total, and the important thing is that figure right in the middle. That's our budget. Our budget's $1,222,000. That's, like you said, 90% FAA money, 10% passenger facility charge or PFC money. So we just don't have enough money to fund the next lowest bidder, and so that's why in the bid documentations, in the city's bid documents, it says we can reject any and all bids. So we're recommending we reject all bids. We go back to the drawing board and figure out how we can put this puzzle together to make sure we can get it within budget.
Is that realistic?
Is what realistic? Get it within budget?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, there's some options.
I see Ned's heading, heads nodding.
We're working some options with the FAA and possibly doing this FY 2020 grant year and throwing that in as part of this project. So then we'll get a $2 million project instead of a $1 million project.
So you're applying for more grant money?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So do I have questions or comments from council? Tom?
Isn't it already pre-engineered? We know what we need.
Is the project pre-engineered?
Yeah.
Yeah, they went through design, they went through all that.
So you've got that note on engineering fees for 109,000. Is that additional or?
Yeah, so what these engineering fees cover is construction management. The FAA requires us to have a babysitter out there to make sure it meets all their specs, and then all the closeout documentation and everything else. So that's aside from the design fees, which you've already paid for.
Further comments from council? All right, then Tom, would you like to make a motion to F2 to reject all bids?
So moved.
A second by Harry. Any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. None opposed, motion passes 7-0. We will move on to item G. Consider approving a contract with U.S. Digital Designs via NNP government contract VH1164 for the purchase of a fire station alerting system in the amount of $539,582 and authorizing the city manager to negotiate and execute all related documents. And Bucky, you're on.
Good morning, Council. My name is Bucky Hasty. I'm the Director of Information Technology for the City of San Angelo. We're here today to request approval to purchase our new fire station alerting system. The system is a Phoenix G2 station alerting system from U.S. Digital Designs. It's going to cost around $539,000 using funds that we've had allocated in the past few meetings.
So it's a budgeted item?
Yes, ma'am. And it is on a national purchasing co-op called NPP Gov via contract 1164. Here's just an overview of the equipment that is going to go into all 8 stations. And there's a little bit of equipment at the 911 as well. If you have any questions about the specifics of how the system works, I have Assistant Chief Brody here with me to answer.
I think the most important part is that it's, number one, already budgeted, so you're not asking for additional funds. As it relates to the technology, I'm not a technology expert, so I don't have any technology questions.
Move to approve of pre-spending.
Second.
Okay, with that, a motion and a second by Harry and by Tommy. So with that, public comment, please. No public comment. We'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion passes 7-0. We will move on to item H, update on sales tax revenue performance by Tina.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Mr. Valenzuela. Tina Diersky, Director of Finance. A quick update for you on sales tax revenue for the month of November. It was up 0.5% compared with the same month in the prior year. And as far as budget is concerned, we're currently about $260,000 beyond what we had budgeted for the first 2 months of the fiscal year.
Would you remind everyone the budget for 1920 is planned at what % sales tax revenue decrease?
So when we originally proposed the budget, it was at a 5.5% decrease from what we projected for actuals for fiscal year 2019. When we did actually finish out fiscal year 2019, we ended up with a little more in sales tax revenue. So the current budget for fiscal year 2020 is actually 6.4% lower than what we actually received in fiscal year 2019.
Good news is we're budgeted correctly. What we would hope to exceed that and have a more positive sales tax trend line, but it is what it is right now. So, okay. Any further questions from council? Shop local, spend local, support local, grow local. Let's go local. Here comes Christmas. All right, with that, we will, that concludes our regular agenda presentation today. So we have special agenda items, which are consider resolution canvassing returns and declaring the results of the special election held November 5th, 2019, providing severability and an effective date. Julia, you're on.
Yes, ma'am. First, I just wanted to say we won't be taking a vote today on the resolution. We are waiting on the county. There were some mail-in ballots, and so until they're able to meet and give us final numbers by precinct, we're not able to canvass the election. But I did want to announce that we had 7,639 voters from San Angelo that voted in our election. From the Tom Green County, that includes everyone for the Water Valley and the state propositions, we had a 15.61% voter turnout. So we had a lot of good participation in the election. And of course, the citizens of San Angelo voted 77.88% in favor of using the Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund dollars to fund the special projects for Lake Nasworthy, and also to go towards the sewer projects at the lake. So we're very happy with the voter turnout, and we're just needing to know when the council's available to meet to canvass the votes. The county will have that to us sometime on Thursday, so we feel it's safest to wait until Friday to meet or Monday.
Can we not meet on Tuesday with a regular council meeting?
No, the state's deadline is the 18th, so we're really up against a short time frame.
So Friday is the best choice?
And if we were to meet on Friday, we would need 72 hours notice, so we would need to publish this afternoon at some point. So it would need to be a Friday afternoon canvassing or Monday.
Let's go for Monday.
Okay.
Mayor, we do want to point out that as far as the, how many council members do we need to actually canvass?
Election Code 67.004A says that we only need 2 council members to canvass.
So if you'll have the mayor pro tem and the mayor, the two of us will meet on Monday at, right?
That would be sufficient.
No, it will be at 11:30 a.m. here in City Council chambers. Is that what you need?
Planning Commission does meet that day at 9 a.m. in this room.
I said 11:30.
Okay.
11:30, Harry, you and I will meet in this room. Okay. I want to give a special shout out to Rick Abbott for his leadership and his thoughtfulness and work and effort to help us get this special election, the use of the Lake Nasworthy Trust Fund monies passed. He was incredible in terms of his insight and strong belief in the project, so thank you to him. Okay, so we will move on to item 9, which is our closed session, executive session under the provision of Government Code Title 5, Open Government, Ethics, Subtitle A, Open Government, Chapter 551, Open Meetings, Subchapter D, Exceptions to Requirement that meetings be open under the following sections. A, Section 551.0712, consult with attorney when the governmental body seeks the advice of its attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter regarding amendment to the SAPAC agreement. And item B, Section 551.072, to deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if deliberation in an open meeting would have a detrimental effect on the position of the governmental body in negotiations with a third person regarding 1.50 plus or minus acres tract out of the G. Blum Survey 166 and item 2 Ford Ranch. At this moment, we are adjourned at 11:38. We will reconvene at 1 p.m. in the second floor for the executive session. Right now, on item 10, follow-up and administrative issues. So we are going to discuss the items discussed in closed session. I'm going to start with Harry Thomas. Could you please make your announcements?
Sure. I make a motion to allow the city manager to negotiate and execute all associated documents with the sale of the half-acre tract out of the G. Bloom Survey 166.
Do I have a second? Second. A second by Billy. Do I have any public comment? With none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. None opposed. Motion passes 7-0. We will now move into our second item. And Lane, do you have an announcement for us, please?
I have a motion to allow the city manager to negotiate and execute an amendment to the SAPAC agreement that, number 1, sets city contribution to $50,000 for 10 years. Number 2, changes composition of the FMIF committee. Number 3, provides requirements for annual report. Number 4, allows drinks in auditorium with requirement. And also, B, city manager is directed to notify the facilities policy to allow right of the first refusal to SAPAC for the rental of the east mezzanine during events in the auditorium.
Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Second by Harry. Do I have any public comment? With no public comment, we'll take a vote. All in support, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed, motion passes 7-0. At this point in time, I'm going to ask for a motion for adjournment. May I have one?
So moved.
Tommy, and a second by Lane. How many are opposing the adjournment?
None.
None? Okay, so it passes 7-0. We are now officially adjourned at 1:56 p.m. on November the 12th.